So 50 years ago, my colleagues at Harvard, Ray Goldberg and another professor that was there, former Secretary of Agriculture for the U.S., talked about the need to link farmers and producers in this, what they called an agribusiness value chain. And this was really the first time that chain had been identified. I think what hasn't changed in the 50 years since agribusiness was first defined is this need for the front end of the chain to respond to the back end. Historically, agriculture has been very production driven, and this concept of being consumer-led is still something that we talk about in every single program and every single message that we deliver. So that hasn't changed. I think the real game changer is the fact now that those markets, that linkage isn't on a local basis, it's a global basis. So it's not the South Dakota wheat grower producing the wheat that ends up in the bread in New York City. It's the South Dakota wheat grower that produces the wheat that ends up in the pasta in China, in those markets, or in the noodles in China. So a tremendous shift in that respect, not only in where the supply and demand are coming from, but also in how those companies are playing. So in the casework that I've done over the past year, I've heard a lot about China. In particular, I wrote a case on Yum China. Here we have a company that's so successful, they're opening one new restaurant, one new KFC restaurant every 18 hours. They have 4,000 in China, 700 cities. Sales there are now larger than the US. So they introduced a new chicken wing product through their Pizza Hut location, was successful, so they moved it into KFC. And what happened, given their scale, is that then they used every single chicken wing in China, and they had to start buying from Brazil. So it's this shift of markets from local to global. It's a shift of axes from the production basically in the US as a driver now into Latin America and into other areas of, say, Russia, and from the consumption, China to India right behind it. I heard one dairy company recently talking about the huge sucking sound that is China. So companies are really thinking about, how does this affect my business? And the big point is that even though we don't think about those perhaps, when we sit in our little local markets, you need to get on an airplane, you need to go to Brazil, you need to go to China, because those are the impacts us every day in what we do. So we've heard a lot of talk recently about the need to feed the world in 2050, and the fact that to do that, the food and agricultural system is going to double production, or at least up 70% to get there. I'm very confident that we are going to be able to meet those challenges. However, I think that, especially in the next few years, the road to get there might be quite rocky. We're already seeing now, again, record commodity prices for wheat, for corn, and this is a really important signal because it pulls that production into the market. It tells the farmers we need more, but now we're looking at marginal land. It's going to take more time to get there. It's going to be, it's not going to come on in a very, in a nice and orderly fashion. So in the next 5 years in particular, given that we have very low stocks right now, that we have some significant weather conditions that might affect it, prices can be very volatile. I think that and so for the challenge for the middle person and the sister, the processor, the integrator, is going to be able to manage that risk. The price volatility is going to be very strong. We could see very strong movements, and so risk management is essential now. I think in the future, or in the past, it was perhaps a luxury. Some people thought we could manage around it, but now it's essential, being able to have the right tools to understand it. The other thing, in terms of just tools, is to have a much tighter linkage through the supply chain, understanding more. The basic point is just security. You need to know that if you're feeding an animal, a dairy cow, that there's going to be something there tomorrow, so it's to ensure that. The other part is to take a whole chain view, because as the prices of feed are very high, then it's critical that the efficiencies in the system are found. So we can do it today. There's a huge squeeze, and it's in that section. The role of technology is going to be critical, and it's important to change how we look at technology. I think we've thought about it more as just looking at bringing costs down on a piece of the chain. And here I think we need to come back to this idea about thinking of the chain as an entire chain, and where technology actually can work across those linkages by bringing it in and putting it in very early, even if that's something that's outside of a processor control in that piece. And that's going to require some very different types of relationships and trust that hasn't been there before. You can't backward integrate and own everything, or you can't go forward and own everything, but how can we use technology in a way? This might involve re-envisioning the entire system, the production system, in a way that is very then responsive to the price signal, to the marketplace, but also to the consumer and what the consumer finds important.